UConn is the most dominant team in college basketball.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Locked On Women's Basketball. I'm Clea Butler. Joined alongside me is Sophia Jones. As you can see behind me, the Butler family is getting into the Christmas spirit. My mom was very excited to have this featured in the back of the podcast. So shout out to my mother, Demetra. But today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. Okay, what are we getting into today, you may ask? Great question. We're going to talk about the ACC. What's going on? Are they having a little bit of a down season? We're also going to get into who could potentially be the player of the year in NCAA. But first, we're going to talk about this week's AP polls. And honestly, the top 10 have been consistent. They have been within the top rankings. This was the same ranking as last week, within the top 10 at least. UConn is remaining dominant at number 1, Texas at number 2, South Carolina 3, UCLA 4, LSU 5, Michigan 6, Maryland 7, TCU 8, Oklahoma 9, and Iowa State 10. Obviously, very dominant teams that we have talked about in essentially every single podcast so far since the season has started. But the Big Ten, we talked about them yesterday and just the kind of prowess that they have and how exciting those games were. As you mentioned, Sophia, bangers to start off Big Ten conference play. The Big Ten ties the record with 9 teams in the women's AP poll. And that has been very significant for them, as we usually see the SEC kind of take over this spot, especially early on. But the Big Ten coming in and showing that they're here to stay this season.
Yeah, it's almost like cheating with the conference restructuring, because if it was actually the Big Ten and that there were 10 teams, having 9 of those 10 teams would be like absolutely insane. But there's a lot of restructuring, so there are a myriad of teams in the Big Ten now, but still an incredible accomplishment, because when you're looking at a conference like the SEC that also expanded a little bit, so for them to be so dominant within these AP polls is a huge testament. And with their conference play starting off, it's going to be a bloodbath moving forward. And I think we can see with that conference especially, we'll be seeing some good movement within these polls throughout the course of the season.
I have a friend that works at Big Ten. She does softball coverage though, but I remember her talking about, getting prepared for the season to cover all the Big Ten teams when those conference moves happen. And she was like, my notes are all over the place. There's 18 teams in this conference now. They're all over the country. I don't know how to keep track, but it is a little bit easier to have some of the most teams within the AP poll when you do have a gigantic conference, but still have to give credit to what the Big Ten is doing so far, especially at the beginning of this season. Tennessee, though, has had a little bit of a record themselves, maybe not necessarily at the level we expected them to be at from last season, but still sitting at 6-2. They're currently ranked 18th right now. But this is the 800th time in the 50-year history of the rankings that Tennessee has had a stretch of being in the top 25 for 565 straight weeks, which is a record that's later surpassed by UConn, obviously. But throwing in some credit to the Lady Vols and what they've been capable of doing so far. Sophia, what do you want to see more out of this Tennessee team this year?
Just consistency. They'll have a really solid win, and then they'll go up against maybe a little bit of a lower major opponent and not be as dominant as you would anticipate them to be. they had a great win against Stanford, but it was a really close game, and Stanford unranked, on the precipice of maybe cracking that top 25, but still not ranked, and they just scraped by them. So I think from the Lady Vols, you just want a little bit more consistency, and for the amount of talent that Janiyah Barker specifically has, I would love to see her just completely take that next level of dominance up a notch.
And I feel like all of this is a true test once we get into true conference play. And I think that's what I'm most excited to see is so these teams that have maybe been sleeper teams so far to start the season or have been really dominant. I feel like once you get to SEC, obviously we were talking about Big Ten yesterday, it's kind of the true test of, are you a fighter in this conference for real? Because these conferences are not to be played with. But some upcoming games that will be important for seeding as well. UConn is going up against USC on Saturday. I think that should be an exciting game. UConn, clearly a very dominant program. We talk about them essentially every podcast. It's UConn. It's the Huskies. You know what it is. USC, Jazzy Davidson coming off a really strong game. Building more maturity as the season goes on is going to be a priority for USC, I'm sure. But this is going to be another really good test for them before they really start their conference play too.
Definitely. They're coming off of a solid win against Washington, who was another ranked opponent, but they stayed at the same exact ranking, which I found that interesting. They were 16 last week, then they are 16 this week. And usually when you beat another top 25 opponent, you might see a little bit of a rise, but I guess the media isn't satisfied all the way with what they've seen from USC. But anytime you have a chance to go up against the standard that is UConn, it provides a great litmus test and a barometer of how much you could really raise in these AP polls.
That's exactly what it is. The standard, which is UConn, the standard of basketball as a whole. We have some in-state rivalries that are happening as well. Iowa State going up against Iowa, who are ranked 10th and 11th right now. Iowa State at 10, Iowa at 11. Obviously, Iowa has been the talk and kind of sort of similar to UConn, but post having that star on your team, obviously both these teams have stars in their own rights, but when you're thinking of a Paige Bueckers, a post Caitlin Clark era for Iowa, going up against essentially Audi Crooks, who has been so dominant. We'll talk about her a little bit later. But that should be an exciting game as well.
Definitely. You love to see rivalries withstand some of these conference shifts. And I think Iowa State versus Iowa is a great opportunity for both these teams to prove a little bit. Iowa State has the one ranking edge over Iowa. They're 10th, Iowa's 11th. So we could see a little bit of a flip-flop there potentially.
Yes, and then another in-state rivalry is going to be Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, which Oklahoma State is currently ranked 23rd, and Oklahoma, which I mentioned earlier, is ranked 9th. We also have UNC and Louisville playing on Sunday. So those are going to be some of our top matchups looking ahead for the remainder of this week. We'll break down that Iowa State and Iowa game because that one should hopefully be an exciting matchup neck and neck. But coming up right after this, we're going to talk about who is the top contender for Player of the Year so far this season. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. Trust me, I had a lot of reactions to the Eagles-Chargers game yesterday. Not positive reactions, but it is what it is. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. Live spreads and money lines adjust instantly. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Okay, so it's obviously early in the season, guys. We get it. But we have to talk a little bit about who has the potential to be the player of the year, because I think this is always great right before you get into conference play, where depending on, let's say, the conference that you're in, the one that comes to mind is UConn. Some of these ACC games, which we will talk about later as well, it doesn't necessarily hold some of the same weight as you see some of these early on games when you're maybe going up against really strong competition, because you have the opportunity to schedule those games if you want to. But obviously, we're going to start off with another Husky. And before anybody says I'm glazing the Huskies, it's just they're a very dominant team. They're clearly the number one in the AP poll for a reason. But Sarah Strong is leading the charge for being the player of the year. She's averaging 18 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists, shooting 57% from the field. And truly, her stats could be even higher than what it is. Obviously, she's already averaging 18 points and 9 rebounds. Those are fantastic numbers. But the biggest thing about Sarah Strong is, even though she's just a sophomore, she shows really true leadership as somebody who could be a senior or a graduate student, whatever the case may be. She also plays very unselfish basketball. I think that's been one of the most significant portions of her game, as well as the way she's able to find her teammates. She shares the ball very well. She's been a great facilitator in her own right. She loves to share the wealth, and she gets a lot of the wealth too. But I think just some of her, accolades, both being on the court, off the court, her leadership could put her as a front runner.
Definitely. And she is such a unique player because she resembles she is basically a combination of raw talent and potential, but also poise and composure and maturity in her game. Because you see the types of moves that she does, that level of IQ, that's where a lot of that maturity and composure comes in. But then, like we seeing her maybe step out and expand her range a little bit, be more comfortable bringing the ball up the court. That's that potential that we also see that is starting to rise up. And she's going to be a very, very good player for a while to come. And when you're talking about that player of the year, I think that she's the best player on the best team in the country. So it is hard to kind of negate that.
Yeah, we saw her pull out against DePaul, what we were talking about. She shot a 3 finally, and she was 1 of 1. That's all you got to do. But if she starts to expand her game even a little bit, as we were talking about before, if she becomes a perimeter threat too, she is the most dominant player in college basketball. And she still has plenty of years left at UConn. So seeing the way she's developed, even from freshman year to now, imagining her in her senior year is a scary thought. Some next close contenders could be a Hannah Hidalgo from Notre Dame, who's averaging 27 points right now, 6 rebounds, 4 assists per game, averaging, she's shooting 49% from the field. Obviously, some of the highlights of this season so far her were that 44-point game where she had 9 rebounds, 4 assists, but 16 steals in 28 minutes, which was the NCAA D1 single game record, as well as some records across the NBA and the WNBA. She could also be a great contender for the player of the year.
For sure. And we said before, Notre Dame goes as far as Hannah Hidalgo goes. And with Notre Dame going pretty far right now, they're still a ranked team. That is because of Hannah Hidalgo. She's just such a two-way force, really sets a tone for that whole squad. And she continues to put the team on her back and impress, is just my impression of what she's been able to accomplish this season.
I am curious, though, depending on the form of Notre Dame, if that's going to infringe on her ability to earn something like this, just because I feel part of it does come from, the wins and losses that you have out of the season too. You mentioned, Bess, that Sarah Strong is the best player on the best team in the country. So curious what the rest of Notre Dame season is going to look like. We also have Texas's Madison Booker. She's averaging 16 points, 7 rebounds a game. In non-conference games, she's put up 22 points, 12 rebounds, and 6 assists in a win over Richmond, which was one of her top games so far this season. What do you like about Madison Booker's game?
It's just so pure. I think that's what I like most about watching her game. She knows exactly the places that she wants to score on the floor, and she gets there. Her teammates help her get there. It just all really flows for Madison Booker, essentially. And she's a huge reason why Texas has been so dominant, and they're on the heels of UConn in that AP poll.
Absolutely. Texas probably the biggest threat to UConn when it comes to those AP polls so far this season. We also have UCLA's Lauren Betts, who's averaging 14 points, 7 rebounds, and 3 assists per game, shooting 56% from the field. We saw her expand her mid-range a little bit, not necessarily coming out to the perimeter just yet. She's also battled with a little bit of injury to begin this season. We haven't necessarily seen her maybe be as dominant as she has been in the past. We know how much this offense flows through her at UCLA, but the guards have really come in and set the tone for the Bruins as well. So what do you think Lauren Betts can continue doing this season to be a front runner?
I would say working on being decisive. She gets doubled. Entire defensive schemes are built around her by the opponents. So either if she's expecting that double, what kind of coverage she's going to get, she's going to see it all this season, especially in such a competitive conference like the Big Ten. So she's going to need to anticipate it and continue to be decisive with her moves. Either go straight into her back to the basket work or kick it out, because she can really get some of those assists up, especially with how much attention she draws. But with some of her stats, it's a little bit different compared to the rest of the field that we mentioned also, because UCLA has had the toughest strength of schedule out of the teams we mentioned so far. So the fact that she's putting up these numbers against really solid opponents, I think bodes well.
Absolutely. Some other potential additions that we wanted to mention, obviously an Azzi Fudd, who's averaging 18 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, and shooting 49% from the field right now. I think those numbers are just going to continue going up for her as the season progresses. Audi Crooks, too, who is just having a fantastic start to the season. 27 points per game. She's first in the NCAA. 5 rebounds, shooting 73% from the field, also first in the NCAA. Outrageous numbers. And also Olivia Miles, who's averaging 18 points per game, 6 rebounds, and 7 assists, shooting 49% from the field. Sophia, out of the kind of additional players we suggested, it's going to be a tough question, but who stands out to you most out of that additional list?
I would have to throw Olivia Miles in there, just because her game is so balanced when you read out that stat line. So balanced and efficient, and doing it on a TCU team that is currently ranked number 8. So really high. And I think Olivia Miles has really succeeded and thrived through this transfer going to TCU.
Well, we will see. Obviously, we love our early predictions, but we'll see as the season goes on. Coming up next, is the ACC having a down season?
There's no reason to let big wireless drain your wallet, especially during the holidays. Right now, Mint Mobile is running their best deal of the year. All of their unlimited plans are 50% off. That means you can just lock in 3, 6, or even 12 months of unlimited premium wireless for just $15 a month. It's the easiest way to take your overpriced phone bill and give it the full Scrooge treatment. And what makes this even better is how simple Mint makes the switch. No contracts, no nonsense, just real savings and real quality service. Switching to Mint lets you keep your same coverage for a lower price. So turn your expensive wireless present into a huge wireless savings future by switching to Mint. Shop Mint Unlimited plans at mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. That's mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. Limited time offer. Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12 months. Plan required $15 per month equivalent. Taxes and fees. Initial plan term only. More than 35 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. Capable device required. Availability, speed, and coverage varies. See mintmobile.com.
Is the ACC having a down season? NC State and Duke were both picked to be the ACC favorites with the preseason. However, what we've seen so far to begin the season for both of these teams has been a little bit rough. Overall, for the ACC, the teams are 2-31 in quad one games, which we spoke about that net ranking. Quad one games are very important when it comes to those at-large bids for overall conference strength. And when you're thinking about getting into a little bit of that postseason, March Madness, all that good fun stuff. The ACC also went 13-3 in the ACC SEC challenge. I did say that the SEC was going to take over the ACC in that. We obviously covered some of the top games from that, but there was still a long list of ACC teams that went on to play and were not able to defeat their SEC opponents. As of right now, it looks like Syracuse is go Orange. Syracuse is technically the front runner when it comes to who has the best record within the ACC right now. They're sitting at 8-1, 6-0 at home. Notre Dame, obviously a top contender in the ACC as well. They're at a 6-2 overall record, having relatively solid numbers. A lot of that, however, coming from Hannah Hidalgo, as well as Louisville, who's 1-0 in conference, 8-3 overall. We see them put some really good performances on, especially in that game against South Carolina. They played a pretty solid game against UConn too. And I would even throw North Carolina in the mix as a team that has the possibility to stand out this season. But again, not anyone that, in my opinion, is going to overpower, which we saw an SEC or even really a Big Ten team.
Yeah, technically, right now, the highest ranked ACC school would be North Carolina. They're 12th in the AP poll, but they're still 9-2, so suffering some losses. And just some of the other teams that you mentioned, they've already had those tests up against the Big Ten and SEC schools, and they did not succeed. So it is going to be really interesting to see how the ACC continues to fare during the rest of this non-conference play, as they are gearing up towards a conference very soon. But like you mentioned, when it comes to postseason rankings or postseason seeding and current rankings, the fact that so many of these teams' stock dropped right now during the non-conference hopefully doesn't hurt them too much once they start battling it out against each other. For a team, for example, like NC State, who I could see when conference play starts, they could pick up a couple of wins, but because they did poorly against some of the non-conference opponents, how much are they really going to value those wins? But the ACC is definitely looking extremely open. I mentioned North Carolina being the top seeded in the AP poll, but when I'm looking at how Louisville played South Carolina, or how Notre Dame, when Hannah Hidalgo is really in that flow state, it could be a very, very different story than what the preseason polls for the ACC predicted.
And I want to talk a little bit more about those, front runner teams that we were talking about between Duke and NC State, who have had great runs within the NCAA tournament as well, but just not having as strong of a start as anticipated. I think NC State was definitely one that probably shocked me most. Some of their losses so far this season, most of them coming from non-conference teams. TCU was one. They lost 59-69, had a really significant upset against Rhode Island, which was a 63-68 loss for them. Lost to Oklahoma in that SEC ACC challenge in overtime, 98-103, and then also lost to USC, which was another one that hurt them, 68-69. Obviously only losing by 1 point. I think we had high expectations for NC State to come back and remain dominant. But when you have a significant amount of leadership from last season that has now gone, graduated, many in the W right now, it's kind of difficult to bounce back from that team that you had.
Yeah, and I almost think that you can look to see where expectations were high because they won that first game of the season against Tennessee also. And that was a huge win. It looked really great. I think that when you look at Tennessee and how they're in the rankings, that win should hold some weight. But those losses just were pretty debilitating from specifically the TCU and Rhode Island games because those were at home at NC State as well, where they had a 20-plus game home win streak. So to see that break and falter, I think disrupted the rhythm that this team really had. But I could see them definitely getting back on track when you talk about the losses against Oklahoma and USC. Those are still very close as well. So it just needs a little bit of consistency and putting everything together from the Wolfpack.
And Duke as well. Obviously, we know Kara Lawson's leadership, but she made it very clear from the start of the season. Obviously, she has plenty of faith within her team, but she made it clear as well that they're still figuring things out. Some of their losses are to Baylor, West Virginia, South Florida, South Carolina, UCLA, LSU. You talk about NC State playing some strong opponents. Duke definitely had a pretty heavy schedule when you're considering that a majority of these teams are within the top 25 in the AP polls. So they definitely are testing themselves, which gives me confidence for them when it comes to ACC play. But when we're talking about the topic of can ACC overpower these like SEC Big Ten schools when it comes to later in the season and when they're going up against each other within the conference, and their games, I don't want to say aren't necessarily going to mean as much, but they're going to carry a little bit less weight when it comes to that postseason seeding.
Yes, and for a team like Duke and on the whole ACC, they always say you just need to be playing your best basketball by March. But for a team like Duke specifically, I feel like I'm seeing them start to inch towards turning that corner and developing some consistency and putting together 40 minutes of good, solid basketball. They were the first team to get out hot against LSU, and they were pretty close majority of that matchup. So I could see them still, like I mentioned, turning that corner, becoming a force within the ACC. But for all these teams, it just depends who's going to be playing their best when it gets to March.
Absolutely. We're still a little ways away from March, but that's great for us because we get to talk about conference play and everything in between. Thank you so much for watching Locked On Women's Basketball. Make sure to follow Sophia and I on our socials, and we will see you guys again tomorrow.